About a month ago, 3 weeks ago, on this podcast, as we often do, we highlighted a conversation that was happening on the working group. And it's interesting because the conversation we highlighted, we were mostly excited because Matthew Hooton called Damien Grant a dickhead. That was kind of the highlight of the actual clip for us. But then what happened after that went is the episode from the working group got taken down. And we were like, why has the episode been taken down? What's going on? And I heard a bit of a rumor, and if you have a look at the dates of this, it'll tell you somewhere, I think, there, August 30th, that maybe Dr. Don Brash was about to sue Matthew Hooton for defamation based on some apparent honest held beliefs shared on the working group podcast. We're just spitballing. Heard a few rumors around the grapevine. And so about a week after that, we, Big Hairy News, received our first communication from an external lawyer wanting to, there was no threat, Chewy. There was no demand to do anything. If we were being generous, we might say they were just offering us some free advice. I will show you that email. The email is from a guy called Max. I've obviously redacted all of the personal confirmation. And it was headlined defamatory statements by Matthew Hooton on BHN podcast. Okay. Never hosted Matthew Hooton, Chewy. He's never been on our cast. We'd love to have him on, but never been on. To the principals of Big Hairy News. That's us, Chewy. That's you and me. In view of the republication of Matthew Hooton's very serious defamations on the Big Hairy News podcast, don't need to say podcast. We need to train people on Big Hairy News. You can just say on Big Hairy News. So for the media watching right now, you can just say on Big Hairy News. Not like what RNZ did to us when they called us Big Hair News. We're not a band from the 80s playing glam rock when they referred to us as Big Hair News. You can just say on Big Hairy News. It just works just like that, simply. You should be aware, we should be aware, aware of the attached letter and markup of relevant statements in the edited version you have republished. Some of your contents we suggest, from some of your comments, we suggest that you seek qualified legal advice on defamation law. In particular, you view that sincere belief is a defence to liability for false claims. It is not. We'll get to that in a second. You should be aware that the publisher of defamatory material by way of republication is as liable as the previous publisher, but may not have the benefit of a defence open to the original publisher. However, you should seek your own legal advice. So how would you, is that just a friendly piece of advice, do you think, Chewy? Just,
yeah, friendly,
mates.
A guy standing there going, hey, look, I'm not saying anything's going to happen. It's just, I'm a lawyer that just is in the area.
I'm not saying your shop's going to burn down, but just for safety. And so this was one of the attachments, and it's just obviously an AI generator because so many of the words and stuff were in the wrong place, and it's what they sent to us. This is our show, and the yellow highlighted bits are bits they saying are defamatory, etc., etc., etc. And we're not going to really highlight those because, they might still want to make something.
I personally enjoyed seeing my outburst put in a legal document. It's fucking great. I think I say go off, King. It looks great.
And also attached to this email was this letter. Again, I've redacted everything. And it was re-defamation Dr. Don Brash Hobson's pledge. So this is actually the letter that they sent Matthew Hooton, which they then sent to us separately to it. We act for Dr. Don Brash in this matter. Peter McKnight and Ali Romanos, barristers of Wellington, have been retained as counsel. Sounds important. Our advice has been sought on your vilification of our client on the podcast The Working Group on 29 August. A transcript of some relevant sections of the program is attached, so they did the same to them that they did to us. Now, this is the crux of the accusation. Remember, this is aimed at Matthew Hooton, and they're saying to us, be careful, get legal advice. So when you hear you, that's Matthew Hooton, you have stated amongst other matters that Dr. Brash is dishonest, is despicably racist, lacks integrity, is obsessed with his own opinions. I like that one. That you defamed him. He said he's got a big head. Is a deliberate, blatant liar, is a failed character, is corrupt, and is fundamentally a bad person of the worst kind, presumably to avoid engaging with the issues Dr. Brash has raised in a characteristically principled way. You launched on a sustained attempt to blacken his character. It goes on, client has patently subordinated his personal interests, which we have been best served by endorsing elite consensus views, yada, 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 yada. Quite obvious you have defamed our client in a very serious way. Because, I mean, let's be honest, Chewie, many of those sound pretty serious. Calling someone dishonest or calling someone racist or a liar or a failed character or corrupt especially, that they sound pretty serious. We get that.
Them's fighting words.
Yeah, them's fighting words. Number 7 says, you should take immediate steps to mitigate the harm that has been caused. Even with them, the claims will have done long-lasting damage to the reputation of Dr. Brash. We can come back to that, but okay. That will be very difficult to put right. So they're basically saying, you have hurt him so bad, you've hurt his character so bad, he's never going to recover from this. That's what that's basically saying. He needs to there needs to be a full withdrawal on the podcast of the comments made in form to be agreed, an apology on the podcast for the making of them, again in a form to be agreed, an assurance given that they will not be repeated, and payment of the legal costs incurred to the date on which such action is completed. It does go on. As podcast was broadcast by MediaWorks, copy has gone to them as well. Dr. Brash, lifelong contribution to New Zealand. You have chosen to attack his reputation viciously, falsely claiming knowledge and authority that to viewers/listeners of the program would leave that reputation in tatters. They're pushing that pretty hard, eh? They're pushing that pretty hard. Yeah.
To shreds, you say?
Now, we'd planned to talk about this today, and I have just heard, thanks to some of you lovely people, that the apology that they've asked for was actually put out to the public about 17, 18, 19 minutes ago. I haven't heard this yet, but I'm being told that this is Bomber doing what they've asked them to do in that legal letter. So, for fairness, we rebroadcast the potential offensive information, then we're also going to rebroadcast the apology. I think that's fair. Don't you think that's fair, Chewie?
That sounds incredibly fair, Pat.
All right, let's do this.
And that is a statement I'm reading out by Matthew Hooton. I've been asked to read an apology to Dr. Don Brash from Matthew Hooton. 4 weeks ago...
Now, sorry, I'm not going to interrupt him. He's going to play the whole thing. But the laughing in the background, I think his guests thought this was a bit of a piss take because they started laughing. That's the guests in the background laughing. We're not going to miss any of the apology. I've gone back 5 seconds.
To read an apology to Dr. Don Brash from Matthew Hooton. 4 weeks ago, on the working group, Matthew made certain comments about Dr. Brash. These comments were made in discussions with Damien and others about the role of the Treaty of Waitangi in New Zealand and foreshore and seabed issue, and the advocacy group Hobson's Pledge. In his comments, Matthew accused Dr. Brash of dishonesty and of advocating his views solely to drive racial division in New Zealand. Matthew accepts that, in fact, Dr. Brash holds these views sincerely and not for the reasons Matthew gave. Matthew does not agree with Dr. Brash's position on the treaty and related matters. His remarks came as part of a vigorous debate on a subject that he is particularly passionate about, as are many New Zealanders, including Dr. Brash. But Matthew accepts that he was not justified in making and sincerely apologises for those particular statements which he unreservedly retracts. Now here's Tom with the weather. That was
I've got more to show you, and we are actually not going to make any of the statements now. We're just going to talk about the issue. There's some more stuff to talk about as well, but it sounds like the apology was apologising because Matthew Hooton said on that podcast that he thought Don Brash was being disingenuous. He thought that Don Brash and David Seymour are too smart to actually hold these views. And the apology which they just said was Matthew Hooton going, I apologise, I now accept you do actually hold these views. So in other words, the complaint was you're calling me a liar, that this is not my honest held belief. And the apology letter was, okay, I accept that these are your honest held beliefs. that how you get it, Chu? You want to add anything in there as well? We've got
Yeah.
a bit more to go.
Yeah, I'm sorry I called you a liar. You are actually a racist. Is how I would bullet point that.
We'll go back at the end and have a look as to what he did apologize for and what he didn't, which is interesting because there's another part of this which is dripping with irony for a lot of people. And that's the advocacy that Don Brash has for free speech, for unencumbered free speech. I don't know if this is what they call a slap suit. A slap suit it's an American term that means they basically slap you with a lawsuit so as to put you in financial peril to make you back down whether you need to or not. I don't know whether it is or it isn't. But the thing there's another part of this conversation, which is these free speech advocates often being very litigious when it doesn't go their way. Bob Jones, yeah. Okay, so this is from 2017. This was a speech written by Don Brash. There's a part of that that says this. I nevertheless value freedom very highly, including, if I may be allowed a brief reference to a later speaker, the freedom to choose to end one's own life. I have been asked to focus in particular on the freedom of speech. In New Zealand, freedom of speech is enshrined as one of our fundamental rights in the Bill of Rights Act of 1990. Section 14 of that law, headed Freedom of Expression, notes that, quote, everyone has the right to freedom of expression, including the right to seek, receive, and impart information and opinions of any kind in any form. Now, I know you know, and I know, that free speech does have limits on it. You know, they always talk about shouting fire in a cinema. So perhaps what this conversation has got to is, was what Matthew Hooton said free speech, or was it something else? We're not going to say it's defamatory because they're sorting that out. Was it free speech, or was it not? I want to play you some other stuff from Dr. Don Brash. Here's another little video from a few years ago when he was selling the virtues of how important free speech is.
It seems to me that the protesters have absolutely proven the case for the affirmative. You don't want to debate the issues, you just want to shout your opponents down. And that's what this motion is about. PC culture shuts down free speech.
Pat, if you could just pause it there.
Yeah.
Because he used an old term there.
PC culture.
We don't use the term PC anymore. We use woke instead.
Yeah. PC culture shoots down free speech. I'll just give you another one. And look, remember what I've already said. There are limitations to free speech. The question is, where are those limitations? Where does the Dr. Brash in this video consider the limitations versus in the lawyer's letter?
Greeted with applause, Don Brash quickly launched into his speech, touching on his childhood and taking the crowd through his career. Before he'd entered the lecture theatre, a warning had been issued. Anyone who protested would be asked to leave. Not surprisingly, Dr. Brash also touched on the importance of free speech and the idea there could be legislation to protect it at universities. There was no heckling, but the floor was opened up after his speech, and one person asked Dr. Brash if he is racist.
I don't think I'm racist. Have I got some subconscious bias against people who don't look like me? I suspect most of us do. I lived for 5 years with a guy who was Sri Lankan and came to see him not as Sri Lankan, but as a brother. He lived with him for 5 years. So I'm capable, I think, of looking through race, and I don't see myself as racist.
So that was obviously a reporter from RNZ with the story. Yeah. Now, I'm just thinking, do I want to do this other bit about Don Brash's character? Because what he said is, don't call me a liar, basically. I believe what I say, and I say what I believe. I think I'm going to leave that bit. I've done that bit before anyway. I'm going to go on to the spin-off article, though, because this is all seriously, like by absolute coincidence, the spin-off have released a story on this tonight as well. And I'm going to read some parts of that. Duncan Grieve wrote it. And I know that the guys from the spin-off hadn't seen the lawyer's letter yet they've probably seen it now. But here is some. So they heard the rumor that I heard on some levels, and they did some digging. And this is what they found. When contacted by the spin-off, Brash made it clear that his defamation claim concerned only one aspect of Hooton's comments. One aspect, right? So Brash is saying only one aspect of all of these things is what I'm concerned about. He says this, I mean, calling someone a racist these days is almost fashionable. It's become so common. I do resent that and deeply resent that. But when he claims that I was promoting a view which I simply don't agree with, don't believe in myself, I mean, that's quite preposterous. So Brash has said to Spin-Off, again, and this is the same as the apology, when Matthew Hooton said, I don't hold on to these beliefs, and he's talking about the beliefs around Hobson's Pledge and around what the treaty is, that it's an act. He's saying, no, that's preposterous. I do believe all those things. Brash went on to say, Brash told the Spin-Off in a pair of interviews that his legal issue was solely with Hooton's persistent attacks on his integrity. He didn't suggest I was wrong. He suggested I was lying and knew I was lying. So again, he's saying that I was playing a role. I was playing a game, that these things I say I don't believe. No, I believe these things. And that's what the apology's been. Despite his persistent positioning as a champion of free speech and opponent of cancel culture, Brash considered that aspect of the podcast a bridge too far. I'm in favour of freedom of speech, he said. But it's one thing to believe in a freedom of speech, another thing to accuse someone of flat out lying. That's what Hooton has done. I don't think that's inconsistent with a belief in freedom of speech. I am going to play that other clip. And I'm not making any accusations at Don Brash about this. You're about to hear a part of a recording that I did with Don Brash maybe 13 years ago. Because this sounds a little bit juvenile, Chewy. And I guess in this instance, he's specifically saying to Hooton, I was not lying about that. Because all of us are liars, right? We've all lied. So to say, Chewy, you're a liar, Pat, you're a liar, Don Brash, you're a liar, I think as a coverall, no one can deny that, especially when you've had like marriages where you've been where there's been infidelity. Of course, there's going to be lying in that as well. So when he's talking about reputation and when he's talking about like what his reputation is and that, you know, I had a chance to ask Don Brash about this because I had a really genuine wondering that if you're going to be the leader of our country, how do we trust you if the person who's closest to you can't trust you? This is an interview I did maybe 12, 13 years ago. I can't remember.
How can we trust a person in a political situation when perhaps in their closest, tightest relationship, and this is not a judgment on you, this is just reality, the person who is closest to them has come to a point where they can't trust them?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I accept that that's a real question which voters have to resolve. And I don't feel comfortable with that fact. It's well known that for the last 2.5 years I've been trying to get back with my second wife. I don't want to go into detail about the progress of that, in fairness to her, but leaving my second wife was the silliest decision I've made in my entire life. And that says something. I've made a few silly decisions.
Your first wife,
Yep.
Your second wife was your secretary?
Correct.
And you cheated on your first wife with your secretary?
I'm not prepared to go into that.
Okay. Well, how about let's stay away from the personal side. How about the appearance of not being able to trust someone in their personal life? How do you then trust them in a public life?
That's a totally fair question. It's a totally fair question. I have to say that if everyone was judged in their public life by what they did in their private life, there wouldn't be many successful politicians, I suspect.
Maybe there'd be more real politicians.
Well, maybe that's right. Maybe that's right. But I'm very much committed to trying to win back people's confidence in my truthfulness and in my integrity, and I take that very seriously.
Right. So you would say to the answer of integrity when you claim, like I saw some video of you the other day with the.
Just remember the reason I'm playing this is the whole lawsuit defamation is about his reputation and his integrity, right? And the reason I'm playing this is I asked him about his integrity. And when I asked him about it, he didn't seem to want to stand on a rooftop and shout out about his integrity.
Exclusive brethren were coming up and talking about how they need the morals in society to change. When what you've been through in your personal life, did you ever Did you ever find it uncomfortable that you were having groups looking to you as almost a moral leader with what's happened in your personal life?
I don't know that too many people have looked to me as a moral leader.
There is video footage. I think it was the Exclusive Brethren. It was certainly a church group saying that we need you, Don Brash, because we need the moral direction of this country to change. Is there any conflict? Did you feel any conflict between what had happened in your personal life and what people were asking you to do in a public position?
That is always a matter of discomfort, no question about that. And that's why I'm very, very keen to restore my marriage if I can, and undo some of the damage which I've did to my wife and my children, and indeed confidence of the public in me.
Will you be putting out words like integrity and morality this upcoming election?
I didn't use them too often, I must say, in the last election. What I'm mainly talking about is the need for this country to do substantially better economically.
Right.
That's my main focus.
And look, really clear, I have no judgments of Don Brash. I have an ex-wife, no judgments at all. But I'm one of those people who probably goes, like when people say, what goes on in your own bedroom is your own business. I actually kind of agree with that. The only time I don't agree with that is if your public persona is very different from your private persona. Because when no one's looking, that's who you really are. Now, I really do hope that Don Brash sorted out that part of his life. I really do hope that Don Brash, got the closure that he needed and it all worked out for him. The only reason I wanted to play that was when we're talking about integrity, how do we get a reputation? How do we lose a reputation? What is the reputation that's worth defending? What is the reputation that is worth suing someone for? I'm going to show one more thing to the spin-off, but why don't you have a crack if you've got anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, like I don't really want to dive too much into, his personal things. I think it does be a little bit of talking about when you are holding yourself up to be a leader with personal integrity and that sort of thing. And I think that comment of like how can anyone trust you when the people closest to you let down, I think is a fair question, and he acknowledged it as such. There's no problem there. I also find his comment of, this is a comment lost in time now, but his whole thing of the biggest focus I have is I want this country to do better economically. It wasn't though, because when was this recorded? Was how close to it was the Aurora speech?
I'd have to. I mean, I did this podcast. That was the one I did with Jeremy Elwood, the Slightly Correct Political Show, and I did it in 2008 and again in 2011. So it's probably 2011. I think his audio speech was.
It was after his speech. That was I think mid to late 2000, and that's Matthew Hooton's experience of him as well. That he was part of his campaign crew around that speech. So, he was already doing the race stuff at that point. He was already driving that wedge. He was already doing Iwi versus Kiwi. And I mean, that is when you look up who was his advertising guy for that and see what that guy's up to now. That is a rabbit hole of all rabbit holes. So, I think if we want to talk about the integrity, and I said this when Matthew Hooton made the comments, is that if the reason you've got to the opinion of this person is because you've worked with them and you've looked at his words and actions and gone, that's racist. You can't you can't say that about me. That is literally free speech. It's one person's opinion based on his experiences of working closely with you and being a political operator, analyzing what you're saying and your actions. There's no question. You've just got to take your lumps. You can be fucking angry about it, sure. You can go, I don't like being called a liar. Fine. Yep. Nobody does. Yep. But you have a history. You have lied before. As you said, Pat, everybody lies. But how big and how often?
The only other thing I want to add now, and then we're going to, because there's one more part to wrap this up, is talking about opinion, honest held belief. I've learned something over the last few weeks. I sort of knew this, but I'm more clear on it now. Just having an opinion doesn't necessarily stop you from committing a defamation, because the honest held belief has to have a reason that you've got that honest held belief. In fact, just purely coincidentally, I asked on Twitter today, all these people who are talking about polking Hooton and claiming he's guilty and stuff, I wonder if any of those people, are going to get a knock on the door from other lawyers saying, well, you've called him guilty and he's not guilty. You're defaming him. And everyone's been saying, it's my belief, it's an opinion. If you need to have something to back up your opinion. In other words, I have this opinion because these are the steps that have taken me to get to my opinion. That's what actual honest held belief or protected opinion is. Just mouthing off what you think because of vibes and feels may not necessarily protect you every time. So people need to be aware of that and be aware that just honest held belief or just opinion is a defense. Has to be a reason for the opinion. Maybe person X did something bad in their 20s and stuff, so you have an opinion on them in your 30s based on what they did in their 20s, even if it's wrong, but you have the history as to why you back it up and why you have that opinion. You'd probably be fine.
And maybe he did that thing twice and was convicted of it twice.
Whatever it is.
In his 20s.
Yeah.
As a theoretical thing. I mean, I am not going to sit up here in my fucking ivory castle and say that I have never told a lie and I have never cheated on someone. But it is, again, I fucking tanked my life in my 20s because I did that. And then do you know what happened? I fucking learned and I never did it again.
Yeah.
So yeah, having personal integrity and having a reputation, it is hard to build, easy to lose, and incredibly hard to build back.
Yeah.
So
and there's also, I mean, look, I'm trying to be fair now. There's also other kinds of integrity. There's workplace integrity. There's, Don Brash was the governor of the Reserve Bank, and even Matthew Hooton said he was a genius economically. So you might have an incredibly good reputation there. So he may have an incredibly good reputation there. Anyway, look, this is the last thing I want to add, because this is also the thing that's almost strangest about this free speech advocate, pure free speech advocate, because if the defamation case was going to be against Hooton against Brash, that means he would have defamed Seymour as well. And the good thing is, on our behalf, Spinoff contacted Seymour. Brash is not the only object of Hooton's derision in the fateful episode. He expands the scope to include Act Party, a former client of Hooton, and its Treaty Principles Bill. Quote, David Seymour cannot possibly believe that his racist Treaty Principles Bill reflects in any way whatsoever either the text or the case law over the Treaty of Waitangi. He isn't that stupid. So once again, Hooton's saying he doesn't believe the words he's saying, which is basically the accusation that Brash was defending. I do believe the words I'm saying. Hooton says on the podcast he's going to inflame hatred in New Zealand. When contacted by the spin-off, Seymour said he had not heard Hooton's comments, but after it was relayed to him, confirmed he had no interest in joining Brash in any defamation proceedings. And indeed, Seymour tends to appear on the working group again soon. I always take Matthew with a large grain of salt. On his best day, he's scintillatingly brilliant. And then there's the day when he's getting sued by Stephen Joyce, or as adamant Todd Mueller is the best Prime Minister New Zealand has ever had. The trick with Matthew is to take the gems for their considerable worth and to be able to tell when he's having one of his off days. So this free speech, quote unquote, free speech advocate is like, I'm not going to do anything about it. Don Brash called in the lawyers, and I'm just going to show you one more time from the actual legal letter. He says himself, he's not defending all these things. He's probably defending one of them or a couple of them. But what the lawyers said, that they say, amongst other matters, Dr. Brash is dishonest, is despicably racist, lacks integrity, is obsessed with his opinions, is a deliberate, blatant liar, is a failed character, is corrupt, and is fundamentally a bad person of the worst kind. And where Dr. Brash said was his one point was that he does, well, I'll read it. I don't believe in myself. No, I mean, calling someone racist these days, it's become common. I do resent that and deeply resent that. That's the next one, isn't it? solely Hooton's persistent attack of his integrity. He didn't suggest I was wrong. He suggested I was lying, and I knew I was lying. So it's about him not telling the truth, not about the accusation, and I won't say he is, the accusation that he's deeply racist, or the accusation that he is obsessed with his opinions, or the accusation that he is a failed character, or the accusation that he is corrupt. See, I think that's probably the worst word in the whole thing, maybe. But it's all about being dishonest, and that's what the apology was that you just heard on Martin's show. So there you go, folks. There's our first legal letter, well, email. And the media is on this now. It's out in the public domain. They're talking about it in Spin-Off. I know that Duncan Garner is sniffing around it as well, and he's sniffing around it because obviously Rover got sent that letter as well, because that's Media Works. And it was out and about on the working group tonight as well. And there you go, folks. Our first interaction with, we weren't accused of anything, like of saying or doing that. What it was is the idea that we rebroadcast some opinions of Matthew Hooton that they thought were defamatory. Although in the end, it wasn't really their, I guess it was the opinions, because it was a deliberate, blatant liar. So it's that those, I'm an honest person is what he needs everyone to know. So I'm happy to say that these are all accusations. We don't call Don Brash dishonest. You know, they're accusations. I've had interactions with him, and you heard a clip of an interview that I did where I asked him about his dishonesty in a personal life, but in a public life, don't know. Fine, happy to accept that everything you've said in front of a camera, you've said stuff you believe. No problems at all. There you go, Chewy. Here's my dissertation.
Family chat, just gather around real close. I don't want anyone to miss this. I actually think David Seymour did a really good statement.
He was amazing.
In that spin-off article.
Yep,
right?
100%. I read this upstairs to my partner, and I said, I haven't done it yet, so I'll do it now. I'm going to give David Seymour a clap. Well done. It's the perfect response, because you know what Brash has done? It's the Streisand effect. We're all looking at it now, and we're bringing attention to it, and we're all going, oh my goodness, but he doesn't mind being called racist. Oh my God, what's going on?
And yet Seymour goes, no thanks, not interested, don't want to be associated with it. But on the way out, Hooton can be really, really good, can be really, really bad. And then the examples that he uses are fucking perfect.
Yeah, sticks one to him.
Todd Moller, absolute mistake. The comment about Stephen Joyce, Matthew Hooton made some comments about Stephen Joyce, had to back down and pay legal costs on it as well. Absolutely devastating.
Yep.
But to bury that with praise as well, and then distance yourself, is fucking, it's well done. Well done, David Seymour.
I thought you were going to sneeze, but that was you throwing up a little bit in the back of your throat.
That's just a new sentence out of my mouth.
No, it's not, Chewy.
No,
we constantly tell people we have a bias. There's no question about that, but we play balls and strikes. If it's worth congratulating on the right, we congratulate it. And that was I agree. It was a really good statement by David Seymour. He handled it perfectly. And I wonder as well if he's got it, but because he's still in the game, whereas Brash isn't, if he's got a bit of a long game, he probably knows that he'll come across Hooton again soon. He doesn't really want to make an enemy of him. And I agree. We congratulate David Seymour on that statement. Fine saying that. I'd love to get you, I've just laid it all out for you, too. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. And if you've got nothing else to say, we've got about 400 super chats we need to get to.
Yeah. No, look, I think it's phenomenal that Don Brash has basically put himself in the position of having someone point out again of like, oh, no, you're sorry, I've got it wrong. You aren't a liar. You are a truly racist person. And you believe that with all of your soul.
That's the only logical, I mean, like, it could just be that he's choosing not to follow up on that defamation, whatever. But the only thing you conclude is when you look at that letter, and the thing is, right, Spin-Off haven't seen that letter until now, if they're watching now, is that he got accused of being dishonest. Okay, that's lying. We don't want to, he's saying I'm not dishonest. He got accused of being dishonest. He got accused of lacking of integrity. of being a liar, but these other things in there. Okay, so he's not a liar. Let's just say that Don Brash says he's not a liar. Fine. He hasn't challenged the despicably racist. He hasn't challenged the failed character. He hasn't challenged the corrupt, which, as I said, I think would be one of the most dangerous things to be accused of if you're in that kind of position of working around lobby groups and stuff. And he hasn't actually challenged being fundamentally a bad person of the worst kind. Because he said the only thing he has a problem with is Hooton saying that he's a liar and he's dishonest. I don't get it. And if that's all you were ever going to say, why the hell did you get lawyers involved who have Streisand affected this by bringing it all to the public?